Hey everyone, welcome back to our second episode of Teams at Work podcast. Today, Mark, who was our guest from last episode and our valued advisor to Bunch.ai, is joining us as a co-host. Welcome, Mark.
Oh, thank you, Daria. I'm happy to be here again.
Awesome. And of course, we have a new exciting guest for you today. I'm excited to have Raffaela Rein as our guest. Raffaela, it's amazing to have you with us. In the past years, you've been on an amazing journey as a founder, but also, of course, as a person. I can't wait to hear about all your takeaways and learnings. And it's really, really great honor to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming over. Let's just jump right into it. So Raffaela's journey is really amazing because basically as not that many founders, actually, I think it's really quite a big achievement, especially in the Berlin community that is still also quite young. Raffaela has built CareerFoundry from scratch into profitability after raising just 5 million venture funding, which is really, I think, a very efficient way to actually build a profitable, growing, and also truly transforming business. So I can't wait to hear all your learnings from that business. Not only has Raffaela built one successful business, she also started a new one. So I'm also really excited to hear about your new adventure. So let's kick it off. Tell us a little bit more about where you currently stand in your journey and how you got here.
Sure. So end of last year, I left my company CareerFoundry, and at that point we were 50 employees, we were profitable, we were a multi-million euro and dollar business, and I had built CareerFoundry, I had founded it in 2013, and I was so in love with the idea of helping close the skills gap, helping people find amazing careers with amazing futures. And I built that company for 6 years into what it is today. And somewhere along that path, you can say I lost the passion for the business a little bit. Not per se I didn't lose the passion about the mission. I still love the mission. I still love helping people in their careers, but something felt not quite as excited anymore. And so I started thinking, okay, if I'm not super pumped about it, then I rather give it over to people who are pumped about it. And fortunately, my co-founder, who I founded the company with, was still super on fire for it. So he took over and I left last year and I started a new company. And that company is called WildWildVentures. And it's literally that. Like, it's a vehicle for me to build all of my wildest and crazy ideas, turn them into companies, or sometimes also, just smaller businesses. And at the moment, I absolutely love it. And as you also pointed out already, WildWildVentures is a purely remote company. So we are globally distributed and work from anywhere in the world.
That's really, truly remarkable. When I was actually, I started following you on Instagram, and of course we'll share also your Instagram handle below in the podcast info. I started following you, I think, just before you decided to switch from CareerFoundry into the new adventure. And it was really interesting to see that you were more and more interested in the new ways of work. And I know you guys experimented with that already at CareerFoundry. It was really interesting to see how you also started kind of venture out while you were still with CareerFoundry. And then it almost felt like, I think, at least I as a follower always felt like there's something happening. She's going to announce it. No one yet knows what it is. And it was so interesting to see that also personal journey and be able to follow it so closely. So thank you again for sharing all that, all the insights and also the learnings. I think being so transparent about the decisions we take as founders is really important for aspiring founders, I think.
I'm sure. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
It was really cool.
Yeah.
Thinking back, before we kind of focus on the future again, which I'm sure there is, many adventures to come and ideas to share, kind of looking back at the CareerFoundry phase where you, as you stated, you managed to build an amazing team, also cross-functional team with many interesting roles, and kind of a very design-centric team, which I think in the building community also wasn't that frequent. Let's focus on that phase a little bit, and I would love to hear from you. What were the decisions that you remember as being key on that journey? So what were the decisions, and maybe focus on positives and negatives, that actually made the CareerFoundry and your personal journey what it was in the past years?
Well, obviously there were a million great and stupid decisions on that way. But I think a really big positive one was when we decided to focus on UX as our core vertical and as our core aspect of our brand. So at that time, we had offered software development, UX, UI design, and we felt we really need to stand for something. And we chose UX. We had been one of the early schools for UX design online. And I think up until today, we are one of the top 5 schools in UX globally. And really standing for one thing and focusing on doing one thing absolutely amazing helped the company grow into what it is today. So I think as a learning out of this is it's better to focus than do many things at once at the beginning. Then a second decision we made, which was both good and bad, was we decided we wanted to have an amazing culture. So, and that came from both co-founders, both of us had some bad work experience, had worked in environments that we absolutely hated. And we were committed to really building an amazing workplace where people can do their absolute best work. And we were very experimental about that. So we tried everything from having absolutely no hierarchies whatsoever, to making salaries transparent, to having peer promotions where the team could decide who got promoted and who, and not the managers. And we thought that would build an amazing culture. However, it didn't. And a lot of these things had an adverse effect and made people less motivated and made people less excited about the work environment. And we literally stood there and we were like, what the hell are we doing wrong? Like, we're investing so much in this culture and it's not working. And I think then we realized, well, we really have to look at it like we would, like with a customer, like we would with our customers. So say, for example, with our customers, we would really dig into their problems and pain points before we make any decisions. And with our employees or with our culture, we hadn't done that. So we started also here really finding out deeply what moves, what frustrates our team, what are the pain points, and then find solutions after that. And once we did that, that really turned everything around. And I think that really helped us become profitable within 6 months, but it also helped bring a tremendous amount of growth and a tremendous increase in the team happiness.
So I want to jump in and follow on some of these comments because I think they're fascinating. And speaking of design and the design industry, you and I share some connections with Envision, obviously.
Yes.
We're both. And when I was at Envision, one of the things that we thought about very seriously was using the same principles of design applied to culture. And it sounds like you approached it very similarly with your organization.
Yes. We first started out wrong, but once we realized our mistake, that was really like the key to success. Yeah.
And it sounds like you iterated in the same way that good designers will iterate on customer empathy, then generate some ideas, generates implementation, and then ongoing revision, which just sounds fantastic. If I might add or ask a much more tactical question about it that can help some of perhaps our listeners when they think about doing the same. Given this, how do you help new hires, new employees, understand the culture that they're joining? So in effect, how do you onboard, particularly in a distributed remote environment?
Well, so we have. So first of all, I think new people feel a culture immediately without you telling them anything, right? Like anybody can feel this is when they walk into an office, whether that's, a creative environment or a suppressive one. So I think to an extent they anyways feel it and they get swept up by the existing culture. What we do to inform them on sort of, our what we want to be is we have a whole day, the first day they join, where they go through all kinds of company related topics. They speak to different people in the company and they go through what we aim to do with the company, both in terms of product wise, but also culture wise. But as said, I think that helps, and I think that helps make people comfortable. But I think new people feel the culture immediately. So it's, I think, more important to work on the culture holistically, not just for the new people.
Makes sense. Thank you. Daria, back over to you for next.
Yeah, I was actually wanting to follow up on two things. One, with regards to also the culture, I think one of the things that we hear a lot in terms of questions, but also keep debating with our community is who is actually responsible for culture and how does the whole kind of like iteration process on it work? Because I think at least that seems pretty clear. Culture is obviously an organic part of how businesses are built. So it's nothing that is set in stone. Of course, it evolves over time as well. And more or less explicitly, I think companies and teams iterate on it. But in your experience, who should be in charge of that process? And are there different options maybe? And how did you do it at CareerFoundry the right way? Maybe you can also share the wrong way learnings a little bit.
Okay. Well, so who should be in charge? So in the end, I think culture is obviously made by everybody in the organization. So I do think everybody can do something to improve culture. However, most of the time it's probably the management or the team leaders who would say, okay, we think we have to improve something in our culture. For example, improve productivity, improve engagement, whatever it may be. And I think there's a lot that can be done. And for example, at CareerFoundry, we have had many stages of culture where the culture completely changed, I think probably 10 times or so, and changed for the better and for the worse. So what we have done and what I would also advise others to do is, first of all, think, what do you want to change in your culture, or what do you want to aim for? Is it motivation, productivity? Is it participation? Like basically find some key behaviors you want to foster. And then you start asking your team about problems and pain points with that. So for example, you would do a team survey and ask, okay, why aren't you or why do you think, what could we do to make the office more productive? And maybe ask 5 questions around productivity. And then from that, you learn what you can actually do. Then I would say, have someone in the team, there may be HR, be responsible to, find, to build solutions, but not just build any solutions, but really, again, check with the team if these are the right solutions. Because sometimes what we, for example, had is the team said, oh, we're very engaged, but we're not productive. So sometimes you find literally contradictions in the survey results. So you have to dig deep, and then once you come up with a solution, you have to ask the team, is that the right solution or is it not? And then that solution can be implemented. And then you can do a survey again, maybe 3 months or 6 months later, and see if you improved productivity. And that's how I would approach it. So, always know what you want to change, then ask the team what the problems are, and then implement solutions and cross-check these solutions with the team if you're actually doing the right things.
That makes sense. I think it actually is really nice because it gives kind of like a good bridge between the top-down and the bottom-up approach in a way, right? From what I understood, what you just laid out was something like the founding team or the management team that kind of has an idea on which behaviors may be lacking or which behaviors may be necessary to change, would then kind of give that nudge or have an assumption or hypothesis that they're working off of. But the actual solution and the actual ideas on how to achieve the goal would then come from the team and facilitated with a support function or...
Yeah. Although I have seen change also come from the team. Like, for example, we had people that said, oh, I want to learn more. And they started book clubs around certain topics, for example, around, marketing topics or leadership topics. And so things like that can also come from the team. It doesn't always have to be from the management, but I think normally it's probably the management who's, actually, it doesn't have to be the management, but I think normally the management has certain behaviors and is more is in a better position to shift the whole company to adopt to those behaviors.
Yeah, and I think I just realized something super important, which I think gets mixed up all the way. I think there's two processes at play. One's the goal setting, which is the decision, which behaviors do we need more and less of? And then the other one being the actual how to encourage that change and how to actually create new habits and so on. And I think probably as a team, depending on the team, of course, and the existing culture, you can collaborate more or less on either one of those. What I'm hearing more is kind of like probably in reality or probabilistically speaking, the goal setting will probably be more encouraged by the management, but can also be nudged and encouraged by the team and vice versa, right? I mean, in the end, management team members are just also team members, and they might also have ideas on how to execute or change specific things. It's just that I think when it comes to how to reach the goal, if there is an overemphasis on, or if it's done too much top down, it basically just misses the buy-in from the team, which I think is oftentimes the problem with prescribing solutions.
Yeah, totally. Like, for example, so one good story about it is we obviously built this or implemented this completely flat hierarchy, right? And the idea for that came from my co-founder having worked at a company before that where, it was thousands of people in the company and only 3 made decisions. And he said, everybody else just went completely brainless into the office every day, and ultimately that company failed. So it got bankrupt because he felt, well, it was only 3 people taking decisions and pushing innovation and so on, so it was bound to fail, and he didn't want to have that for us. But it turned out later, we didn't even have that problem. In CareerFoundry, people had always felt they can bring ideas forward and so on. So when we implemented the flat hierarchy, we solved the problem we didn't even have. And, that's now funny looking back, but it's actually, we spent so much time and money building that flat hierarchy that, mistakes like that can easily be avoided.
In either CareerFoundry or in your current venture, given how diligent you are about thinking about the design of culture and the implementation of culture, what have you done when it comes to company values or company principles? It's a topic that a lot of founders struggle with when to create those, what they should be, how do you support them? I'm really curious about what you've done in that realm. Yeah.
So I might be a bit controversial here, but I actually don't believe in company values. And the reason is,
That's wonderful.
And the reason is, we have tried this several times, I think first time in 2015, we even had a whole offsite with the entire team where we took the entire team and said, let's all together decide on company values. And the team loved it that we even included them in that. The only thing is, the typical thing happened. We came back in the office the next day, and we had these beautiful values, pinned everywhere in the office, and it didn't change anything. Nothing at all. And then I think a couple of years later...
I'm smiling. I'm smiling. You can't see me, but I'm smiling.
Yeah, like the typical thing, right? And then a couple years later, we decided, okay, maybe let's give it another try. And we did it again. Back then, I think the second time we only did it with the team leaders, but it ended up being exactly the same story. So what I believe in is what I think hinted at earlier, is that as a management team, and I'm not just saying the founders or the CEOs, like all of the team leads, I think there needs to be a shared understanding what the behaviors are that the company wants to foster, and it shouldn't be more than 4. Yeah, so it could be initiative, it could be innovation, it could be productivity, it could be lots of things. So, but not saying that out loud, but then really using the employee survey to find out how these 4 pillars of the company are going, what can be improved, what is not going well, and then measuring that every quarter as to how you progress on these factors that you, and on these behaviors that you set yourself. So as an example, we had 4 pillars, I call them, 4 set of behaviors we wanted to foster, and we had questions. Say for example, for productivity, how do you feel productive at the moment? Do you feel engaged at the moment? What can we do to make you feel more engaged? And then we would every quarter ask the same questions every quarter, and then we could see, does it increase, does it decrease, and we could find out, okay, why is there a decrease, for example, when we had an increase last month. And I think that way is much more effective than putting a poster at the wall that nobody sticks to anyways.
I love it. And while I'm sure that there are going to be listeners who are more, let's just say, value centered in terms of promoting the values, I think at the end of the day, the most important thing is that everybody explicitly and implicitly agrees on how they're going to show up on a day-to-day basis. And it almost doesn't matter how you achieve that. So I love your contentiousness on this issue.
Yeah. And I think that way also you have something more actionable, right? Because a poster at the wall doesn't change anybody's behavior, right? But if it's really part of the survey, part of what management is measured on, for example, then I think it's much more likely to actually trickle slowly into the culture.
A related question that is more about what you're doing now, and given that a lot of the folks who are going to probably listen to our podcast are part of remote companies, and I have a remote experience, you obviously have a remote experience, and then it is obviously a very hot topic with companies like GitLab and HashiCorp and Vision, all trying to prove this out eventually on the public market stage, right? What are you learning, given how seriously you take the engagement of your team in ongoing cultural creation? It sounds like that's really important to you. How do you make sure that works when people don't have much in the room time? And what are maybe things that you've experimented with that have really worked in that? And what are some areas that you still are experimenting on and trying out design solutions on?
Yeah. I love the question because, again, I have maybe a controversial approach here. So I think a lot of people in general, whether it's remote or not remote, when they think of culture, the first thing they think about is, oh, let's all go out for drinks. Let's have an offsite in Mallorca or some beach resort. And that sort of, these things are nice, don't get me wrong, but I don't think that they actually affect culture. These are one-off things, that maybe bring the team a bit closer together. But I think culture is really sort of the day-to-day, the nitty-gritty. And so this may not be cool, but we are not doing any offsites. We're not doing any free lunches or anything like that. But what we do is tough love. So with that, I mean, we're really trying to build a feedback culture where it's not, not the bullshit kind of once in a year review, but the constant feedback towards each other where we really try to help each other grow. And everybody who comes in that culture knows that. So basically people who come come in because they want to grow and they know, okay, here we are so invested in each other that we're going to give each other the really tough love, the really uncomfortable feedback, but not out of a meanness, but really out of wanting to help each other grow. And what I've seen, and this is not just my new company, this was also at CareerFoundry, this goes way, way, way further than any team retreat can ever go, because that shows the employee that this is a company that's invested in them and that is, going to help them grow into the best possible version of themselves.
I love your thoughtfulness on this, and again, whether or not you're controversial or not to the folks who listen to the podcast, what I think is a great snippet is this idea that we don't build culture the few times a year we decide we're supposed to be building culture. We build culture day by day in the interactions we have and the way we interact with each other on a daily basis, which I think is both correct and maybe often missed in a lot of companies. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and it's hard, especially in a remote context, right? To give that tough love, but also to make time to joke around via Slack. It's much easier if you meet somebody in the office over the water cooler and you make a joke then. So we really have to also stop ourselves, make sure we joke with each other while we're working. But again, I'm not saying team retreats are wrong. I mean, they're certainly super nice, but I don't think they really build a culture, especially not in a really designy, in a very thoughtful, long-term way.
My question is a follow-up to this one, which is still staying in the remote environment a little bit, because I think whether fully remote company and team or not, I think moving into the future of work, we all will be working remotely with each other in one way or another. And I think what's personally always tough for me as a founder, trying to always spread thin, of course, trying to kind of help the team, unblock the team on like 7 different areas at the same time, is to actually build trust with each and every one person on the team. And specifically, as you grew with CareerFoundry, I'm sure you also probably made that experience where you don't meet everyone face to face anymore and people know you less and less. How do you make sure people trust you and you trust the people on the team, especially with the remote component? So both remotely and maybe also face to face with new team members.
So I think there's 2 layers. I think there's the trust with the people that you work most closely with. And then as a CEO or leader, you also need the trust of the entire team. So in general, for any leader, I think you can't build a great relationship, a trust-based relationship with more than 5 or 10 people. So for example, towards the end, we would make sure no single team leader of ours had more than 5 or 6 reports. Because at that level, you can really get to know a person, get to know, their ambitions for the future, for example, and really can help them put them in a position where they are set up in the right way for their future, but you can also have enough time to give them the feedback they need and give them the help they need. So this is the first thing. And that means, me as a CEO, for example, of CareerFoundry, I only had 4 people who I was working that close with. But I, of course, also as a CEO, you need to have the trust of the entire team. So how do you get that? I think actually Instagram helped me loads with that, funnily enough, towards the later stages, because I think it gave people, a mirror into my brain that I wasn't able to communicate every day to the team. But also we had, for example, all team meetings every Monday, every Friday, where people could speak their minds, where we would, tell people what's going on in the company, what's going good, what's going bad. And I think that creates trust. Transparency creates trust, and that people see, okay, you may not always have all of the answers as a CEO, but that you are aware of dangers, that you are aware of what's coming, and that you have them covered in that sense.
So it's really loads about safety, actually, and providing safety as well.
Yeah. So actually a funny story also. So we did like one of these personality tests with our team 2 years ago. And I thought, somebody who joins a startup, even a startup that's like 4 or 5 years old, must be quite adventurous, risk-taking person. But what came out was that most of our team members were actually very risk-averse. Like they were really seeking stability. And now, if anybody runs a software company that's listening to this, it actually makes sense, because most developers or designers choose those professions because they're not very risky professions. Like even if it doesn't work out with one company, as a developer, you always find another job. So actually, we found out developers, designers are very risk-averse people, and hence our job as management was to give them as much security, job stability as possible. And that was like the highest need on the pyramid.
That totally makes sense. And I think that is actually something that I heard a lot of founders constantly struggle with, including myself, which is especially in the early stages where you actually build something from scratch and everything seems unclear yet. And there is a user base and a user journey, but things don't yet fully work out. And you kind of are iterating through the tough, like, valley of death scenario, right? That is when kind of like holding on to this long-term vision and kind of sticking it out and so on is actually really important. And I think a lot of risks and a lot of teams break during that time because the needs of people involved are so vastly different. So the founders, of course, are interested in the kind of like the long-term win and the big success in the end, and also the learnings. And sometimes and often you have people on the team that are also interested loads in learning. So I really like your tough love motive there, because I think that might be the overlap. But oftentimes you also just have software engineers that are, like they might be bored in like a larger company and they want to have a bit of a challenge going forward, but they're not aware of the whole kind of dark sides of entrepreneurship, right? The continuous ambiguity, the switching direction, the insecurities. And I think that to balance this while building tech companies, I think it's one of the most kind of tricky challenges that doesn't get talked a lot about.
It's super, super hard indeed. We also had exactly what you said, developers from more established companies who joined us, who left again because they couldn't deal with that kind of uncertainty. And I think it's hard, like, no matter how much you tell somebody, wow, this is a startup, it's up and down, but it's going to be amazing. Once they're actually in it and they see how up and down it is, you can't, you shouldn't beat yourself up as a founder if you do lose them. I think it does make sense to do a personality test like that fairly early on. There's tests like that online to find out at, say, every year or so, which way your team is skewed. Because I'm pretty sure at the very beginning, up until you're 10, 20 people, you have a lot more risk-loving people on the team. And once after you get towards 20 or so, it somehow shifts and you get more risk-averse people. Or at least I think that's what happened with us, although I can't 100% say. But it basically requires a different management style and especially a different kind of communication.
That's super interesting. Being mindful of your time, of course, and I know you're super busy as a founder. I just have two kind of, last wisdom kind of questions in order to really make sure we give our audience the kind of key takeaways. So both questions are a bit high level, but I think very worth bringing up. The first one, obviously, since it's about teams, and I think it's so amazing to see how you scale that company from, the two of you in the beginning and then growing it to over 50 people. What would you say is like the key secret to building great teams? If you were to boil it down to a bunch of bullet points, what would that be?
Yeah. I think definitely feedback, like to build a feedback culture early, as early as possible, where, the team gives you as a founder feedback, but also you give the tough love out early. Because I think that helps in so many aspects. It helps, find out early who's a good fit for the team and who isn't. It helps early discover problems or discover, who may be overwhelmed with a job. So I think that is definitely, and that's hard. It's also the hardest job to actually, take the time and give that feedback. One example is, for example, I have an employee, and she is amazing at the job she does, but she's not very good at coming to the point. So she's waffling, and that is affecting her work performance, because nobody else in the team wants to talk to her because they know it's going to take forever. And for the longest time, I didn't dare saying anything, because this is not just a work thing. It's probably a thing she has since she's a small child. But I'm not doing her any favors if I don't tell her, right? Because it does affect her work performance. So I did have to actually go and start talking with people about these really deeply personal issues, which is hard. But on the other hand, once I managed to get sort of an understanding, because often these people weren't even aware that they did these things, then I could actually help them become better, not only at my company, but at any company that they will ever work at.
And those are the stories that they kind of carry with them, right? And also the real reason why probably people stick around is when you actually look back and you see, I've been here 6 months or 12 months and I'm a completely different person now. So much more effective as a retention instrument than offsites.
Yeah. You probably heard that saying when they say, people don't leave a company, they leave a manager. And I think at the same time, people stick with a company. So for example, what you just said, how do you keep people when things really go to shit? And in most startups, there are times when it really looks like this is never going to work out, right? And everything the outlook is so bad. So how do people stay? And I think, for example, for us, we had these times, and we had times that were super tough. I think people stayed because of us, because they knew we were invested in them. And fortunately, they did stay. So I'm still grateful to this day. But I think it's about this investment in people.
That's super good. Good advice. And last but not least, obviously, the question around entrepreneurship and being a founder, which we all know is one of the toughest but also most amazing experiences probably in life. What do you think made you a successful founder or makes you a successful founder? And what advice do you have for people that are considering starting their own businesses or are just in the beginning of it?
Yeah, totally go for it. If you're planning on, or if you're just playing with the idea, definitely try to found a business. But I would, hedge my risk a bit. I would, maybe moonlight the first 6 months and see if the idea works out. With moonlight, I mean, keep your day job and try to build a new business at the side and see if it works out. Because sometimes it can take forever to get a business off the ground. So it's good to have some income coming in. And I think it's very hard to say about oneself why I was successful. I think definitely I always believed in the ideas that I had, and I also I just felt I couldn't give up to an extent. I felt like, okay, I have to make this work, at least to a certain extent. And I think basically this perseverance is quite important. And So I think both, even now it's much easier than with CareerFoundry because my second company, and I know more what I'm doing, but there's still a lot of tough times. But I just always feel like I can't give up. Now I'm already put my foot in it, and I just have to get through this. And then most of the time, somehow it also turns around again.
Raffaela, I just want to thank you for joining us, and it's been a pleasure to interact with you and listen to you talk with us today.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Raffaela. I think it was super inspiring from a perspective of obviously building teams, but also from a personal perspective of being a founder and hearing some of your advice and some of your learnings. Really just encourage everyone to follow Raffaela on Instagram. It's really, truly remarkable what you can learn. And Raffaela also does a lot of book summaries and kind of lessons learned over and over again. So I think it's one of the actually most not only entertaining, but also knowledgeable accounts that I'm following. So thank you again for spending all the time daily to share all your insights with us.
Oh, thank you very much.
All right. Awesome, everyone. We have an amazing follow-up guest joining us next week. So I really, truly hope you will enjoy this podcast, but also the next one. Next week, we actually have an engineering leader with us. So everyone who is building and scaling engineering teams will be able to hear lots of awesome wisdom and insights there as well. Thank you so much for your time, everyone. Thank you, Raffaela. Thank you, Mark. And we're looking forward to hearing and being with you all soon. Bye-bye. My name is Daria Kutnik, and if you're interested to learn more about team rituals that work for your team, that other successful companies are doing in order to create great cohesive cultures, do check out Bunch.ai. This is also where you can find out more about what we're building and sign up for our newsletter and find out what our future episodes will be about. Looking forward to having you and talk to you on the next episode.